In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. I'm sorry, let me start before that. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. So that would put the proper context to our sermon this morning. And I was wondering where I was going to go with this portion that you did read, if it tied in at all, but not. Our sermon today is Faith in the Fog. And if we look at just fog in and of itself, and if we kind of go into a definition of fog, what it is, there's two different ones here. The first is a thick cloud of tiny water droplets suspended in the atmosphere at or near the Earth's surface, which obscures or restricts visibility to a great extent, greater than just a mist, and significantly reducing our visibility. So that's the physical definition of it. But there's also another definition, that something that obscures or confuses a situation or someone's thought process. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the both of these. And when we were in Sabbath school earlier, Becky talked a little bit about her sister's experience, and I'll talk a little bit about mine as well here. But when we're in the fog, it seems a little different than just the definition where I talked about little water particles in the air. When you're actually in a deep fog, sometimes it can be a little bit more scary. So one, why is it? What is it about the fog that is scary, and why does it bring out a fear in us sometimes when we're in fog? And can we avoid it or go around it, if you will, or go through the fog? Should we look at some of that, both in the physical sense of going through fog and in the fog of indecision, the fog of brain fog, if you will? How do we get through that? And that was part of the thought that came to me in this. And so I have to tell you, there's different types of fog. There's sometimes very dense fog, and there are times when the fog is not quite so bad. So as we go through different life experiences, we can find that sometimes we're going through a very, very dense time in our life, or a difficult time making decisions that are difficult. And other times, the fog is not quite so bad. We can actually see our way through that, and life's a little easier. So there are different types of fog, as I noted. The first of those is just the water droplets. And we don't think too much about that in the sense of being scary. But when you're driving through billions upon billions of little water droplets, it can impact us. There was something else that, as I was thinking about this, that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And how does this virus spread? And when you think about it, it's the tiny, tiny little vapor droplets that as we breathe, that is one of the means that this virus spreads. And you don't really think about, that as a scary thing. But in reality, that is one of the reasons that we spread a virus and other people get sick. And that's why they're wanting us to wear masks, to minimize that. Well, they've shown the masks aren't that effective, so they've given us other ways to continue to try to protect others around us. But water droplets, although they don't seem scary, they can have significant other effects. The others of that is brain fog. I don't know if you've ever experienced a moment of brain fog. Becky, obviously many times. I had one moment, and this probably goes back about 15, 20 years ago. I was driving the car and suddenly had if you will, a brain fog, and suddenly came to realize I didn't have a clue on where I was at, where I was heading, or what I was doing at that very moment. And it was just like, it just came upon me, And I had to stop. I literally had to stop the car and come to my senses as to what was going on. And it was just one of the scariest moments. It's just like, yeah, it was like I was out from another world and suddenly popped in there, and I had to come and realize I'm on my way to, a client's to work on some equipment, but I literally had that brain fog at that very moment. We've heard of others, soldiers, that the fog of war, and where at that very moment, from either fear, the shell shock or whatnot, they don't have the capacity to make good decisions, and they freeze or they seize up, and they are literally in a moment where they have an obstruction in their thought process. They've been trained over and over again, but they are literally in this fog and unable to make good, decisive decisions. And the last one here is spiritual fog. And as a church, as Christians, many of us go through this. And it's like, how do you get through it? How, do you go through it? Should I try to go around it? What are the options here? So these are some of the things that I wanted to talk to this morning. And part of that was sharing this recent experience as Becky, and this was about 2 weeks ago. And to me, Carla would tell you that sometimes a little bit more on the risky side when I drive. And I had to make this trip up to Shawano, and I was literally in fear. I was white-knuckled on my steering wheel and literally pulled forward towards the windshield because I was really struggling. I couldn't really see very well what was in front of me, and I was fearful about what was coming behind me. Okay, so I slowed down. I was hoping to see, if you will, a set of lights or something, signs. I could barely see the lines in the road, and only 2 or 3 of them. And so maybe 80 feet was the best of my visibility. And I was fearful about who was coming fast down the road behind me. So it was kind of scary. And so I was driven to this, not knowing what's ahead of me, what's behind me, and what I was driving into. So that was where the fear was at. And I was struggling with it because later on I finally got to my destination. But I found out later on that as I turned around, it was coming back about an hour or 2 later, that the freeway was closed. This is the 29 freeway. And again, you were sharing with us how your sister had dealt with it. But the 29 freeway had been closed because there was a major car pileup. There was a semi and someplace between a half a dozen to a dozen cars all over the road because they weren't seeing each other and somebody was going too fast, and obviously there was an accident. So in what Becky was sharing about her sister, and that's why I was saying, oh, you're going to steal the thunder out of my sermon, but her sister was praying the best way she knew how to, but she was reaching up to her little statue of Mary in her car and praying with that, and praying to her dad, trying to have some way to feel safe. Okay, my way of feeling safe was hoping that I could at least see some taillights in front of me, but not so close in front of me or that I'm rushing into them. But also looking in my mirror, slowing down, trying to find some way at least to feel comfortable. Sometimes we walk through the fog. Now, you see 2 pictures here. One of them is a single person walking. Which would make you feel comfortable if you were walking through the fog by yourself or walking through the fog with someone else? Okay, why? What is it that makes you feel more comfortable? Okay. Several things. Having companionship it builds a sense of courage and having some support there as opposed to going through the fog by yourself. Okay. The same water obscurity is still there, but at least you have some comfort in knowing that there's someone else there with you. How about flying through if you will, fog is just a cloud on the ground. when you're above the clouds, you feel fairly okay. But that moment where you drift down into the cloud, you feel kind of uncomfortable. You look out your window and you can't see, and then you realize the pilot can't see either. He's 100% totally depending upon his instruments to guide him down through the fog, if you will. And then finally, he'll get down low enough, and his instruments are guiding him as long as everything's working properly, but he'll get down below the fog, and then he can see the runway lights and everything, and you're feeling comfortable because everything looks like it's in control, but you don't have any control. You're dependent upon someone else, again, to guide you through the fog. In the old days, sea captains were dependent upon these lights on the shoreline, okay, to guide them through, to make sure that they wouldn't run aground on the shore. And so we have lighthouses throughout many different cities, and some of them are still functional, some of them are more tourist things, but now ships have navigation systems and GPSs so that it helps guide them through despite that. But in the old days, that was the only way to know that you were not going to run aground on the shoreline. So again, this gets back to fear. Fog can bring upon us fear, whether or not it's the physical fog or being in a mental state where things are not clear. Okay, we don't know what's there. There's the fear of the unknown, fear of what we cannot see, what's ahead of us or what's behind us. Just as I was driving in the fog, and I had a lot of fear because I didn't know what was in front of me, and I didn't know what was behind me. So there's that fear of what we cannot see. Also, a fear of not having control. Although I had control of my steering wheel, I had no control of the other cars around me. And that's unfortunate how many accidents do happen. People lose control, or we are in a situation where we're going through a trial and we don't have any control over it. Just as Carla has gone through her cancer and Deb has gone through cancer now, we lose control over things that we thought or we took for granted. And so how do we get control back in that situation? So the other one that I talked about was spiritual fog. Now exactly what is it? Am I currently in a sense, a state of spiritual fog? Should I be afraid? And how do I get out or above this fog? And so that's where we struggle sometimes in being lost spiritually or in a spiritual fog. So we have to think sometimes, how do I keep from being lost? How is it that I can keep from being alone in the fog? Now, when you think about what we talked about here just a little earlier in many of our Sabbath school studies, there are many people out there that are lost spiritually. Not just physically lost in the fog, but they're spiritually lost in a fog. Or they're alone. They have no one else to help guide them through this fog that they're in. They don't have a relationship with God. They don't have any connection with anyone to direct them to a truth, to help them see through this spiritual fog. So there are many people out there that are lost and alone. They may be around physically around people, but they're lost and alone in a spiritual sense. Doubt. Many of us, if you think about spiritual fog, it says the deepest fog that one might have is he who has the fog of doubt. Now, when we doubt God's power, when we doubt his grace, if we doubt his ability to forgive us, we are lost in a fog. We are in doubt. And we've lost that connection. There's no good connection to help lead us through. So this sometimes can be one of the biggest ways. And when you think about it, the enemy, Satan, wishes that we would stay deep in the fog and stay deep in doubt. Because that's how he keeps us blind to God's word. It keeps us blind to God's leading. And so why this is one of the deepest things. And when you reflect upon other church members or other family members, and we see that they have doubt in God's ability and power. And sometimes that can be ourselves when we doubt God's ability to forgive us of something that happened in our past, as though God doesn't have the power to do it. People sometimes have carried things from their past for 10, 20, or a lifetime, throughout their lifetime, and they still have the guilt of that sin, as though God didn't have the power to forgive them. And so this is one of the main reasons why they can lose their faith. So we do have some challenges here, especially when we're going through trials. We can have doubt, when we're unsure of the future. And in today's political environment, in today's religious environment, we see there's a lot of uncertainty in the future of what's going to happen to Christianity, to our little church, to our neighborhood. All of these things here, we're unsure. Just as when we were driving in the blind, fear of what's coming at you. We don't know. Just as, again, Carla and Deb have both gone through a period here where they don't know their future and they don't know what's coming at them next. Many of us are going to go through trials here in this next year, and as times get worse and worse, as we come closer to the end of time, we're not sure what's going to be coming at us. And we may not see it, but we have to be ready. Fear of what's behind us, the sins of our past. We still sometimes carry that fear along with us. And this is something that we're looking as we're driving in our car, if you will, for any little signpost, any little light, any little marking on the road that kind of keeps us on the road so that we're not afraid of it. God puts those there for us, but sometimes we're not looking very well. How about being weak in our faith? There are people that come to church all the time, but they're still weak in their faith. And that can be a challenge. They're still lost in a fog, if you will. And as I talked about, a doubt in God's power. Power to forgive, his power to heal, his power or his grace that he gives to us each and every day. All of these things are the challenges that we face. And where is our strength? Where is our faith? Okay. So would you feel more comfortable if you had a guide, someone that was going to take you through the fog? All right. So God provides these things for us. He provides the light for us. And he tells us, I am the way. I am the truth and the life. He is there for us. He is our guide. But sometimes we're fumbling in the dark and we're not looking for the guide. We're not looking for his light. We spend too much time thinking, well, I'm okay, as I was on my steering wheel, thinking I'm okay, but in tremendous fear of what was there before and behind. But he says, I am the way. And it's through Scripture that he's providing all these signposts, if you will. He is the beacon that's shining there. But sometimes we're not looking for him. And we're fumbling in the fog, not looking very clearly. But Scripture continues to be a guide, a light for us. And I noted a couple of scriptures here that help to show that he's continued there. It says in Hebrews 11:1, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Again, when we're in the fog, spiritual fog, we're not going to see everything, but it's not up to us necessarily to see everything. We just need to know that God is the light. He will guide us through, even if we don't see it or understand it. John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. 1 Corinthians 10:13, no temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man, but God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond that which you are able, but with the temptation will also make a way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. Again, he is there to guide us through. In Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding, as I was, trying to guide my vehicle. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. We sometimes have to take ourselves out of the driver's seat and let God drive. Make ourselves the passenger, if you will. Faith is kind of like a radar. When you have the faith, you can see through the fog. Even though God is the one guiding, He's the one leading it. By having faith, He's going to bring us through. So it's kind of like, again, being able to see through the fog. Now, while we're in the fog, we have to have faith. We want to get out of the fog, but we're still in the fog, many of us, believing in what you cannot see, trusting in God, knowing that He is leading the way, leaning not on your own understanding, and giving it over to the Lord. Let God forgive your past and direct your future. Let God be the beacon that lights our way. So ultimately, again, we want to be coming out of the fog. And that's the hope and the goal, is not to stay in the fog. Who is it that wants to keep us there? Okay, Satan. He wants to keep us in the blind. And unfortunately, we look around this world today and we see too many people that are in the fog. They are lost and alone. Their ability to make good choices and good decisions have been obscured. And we see it every day now. What was supposed to be true and good, people are thinking, no, that's not true. That's a lie. And what was a lie and not acceptable today, people are saying, oh, that's okay, that's acceptable. People are definitely lost and alone in a fog right now. But we want to be coming out of the fog. We want to be secure in His light. That is what cuts through the fog, if you will. Through the faith, we can see through it. And this is where we need to be looking, how do I get to God's light? How is it, if I'm lost in the fog, how is it that I want to be able to get into His light? We want His way to be made clear. His way is what opens that path so we can see it. Just as I wanted to see some light so I could see the road better, so that the road was made clear. In our spiritual fog, we want to be able to see His way so that the road or the pathway is made clear. So sharing His light. It's not okay for us just to say, okay, I'm saved, I'm okay in my car, or I'm okay in the decisions I'm making. God has an expectation that we are going to share His light. Let your light shine before others, that they may see the good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. This is from Matthew. And just another little one that I picked up on. God, let your light shine through me like a fog light, so that those who are lost, those who are sick, and those who are dying find your love through me. All right, so God is going to provide the light for us, but He wants it to reflect and shine so that the car behind us, if you will, the person, the soul behind us, can see a little bit of God's light shining through us, so that, oh, there's the road, there's the way, there's the path. It's not you, but it's Him leading through you, that they might, in fact, be able to see their way through as well. So the good news is the most loving act that you or I can ever do for someone is to share the gospel with them. This is sharing that light. It's not light from us. It is God's light reflected off of us. And that's what the gospel, the good news, is about. So saving souls. God saves us. Can we share His gospel that He might save others from destruction? That accident that happened behind me, okay, there was no way for me, if you will, to save anyone there. It happened behind me. But if there were more lights and if it was more clear, if we are sharing more light and if we are more clear with others around us, we're hopeful that others may not be lost or lost to destruction. Ultimately, we want to be out of the fog, if you will, or above the fog. And we are promised that things will be made clear for us for all eternity. There is a promise of eternity, but who is it that you are willing to leave behind? Is there anyone you can say, well, they're not really worth me spending the extra effort of the time? They are just as lost and as alone as we might have been had we not seen God's light. If you will, we are very blessed. And even from the memory text, does anyone remember the memory text this morning? I didn't, so I had to bring it up with me. But it tied right into this, where you have need of endurance, or read patience, I think it was, so that after you have done the will of God, you may receive the promise. And that's the whole point of what we are looking at, the promise of eternity. So God wants us to stay down, stay above the fog, but the enemy wants to keep us down in the fog so that we're blind and don't see what's going on. So as a closing note on this, and kind of a challenge to all of you, that this year, we're starting a new year, and I would challenge each one of you to find someone that is in the fog, they're lost and alone, and to be able to either invite them here or to start a Bible study with them. And that would be the challenge that I would leave you with today, is that there are many of us, sometimes even in our own church, we're lost and alone, and we're in fear. Reach your hand out to them to share God's good news. They don't need to stay lost in the fog.